All right, guys, today we're going to talk about the religious divisions that resulted because of the Reformation. But before we do that, let's first recall the Middle Ages and remember that during the Middle Ages, prior to the Reformation, everyone was Catholic. The Catholic Church was very powerful. We had several countries in Europe that were all united by the Catholic Church. So even though there were different countries, different monarchs, different kingdoms, they were all united by religion. This obviously made the Catholic Church very powerful, and particularly the Pope very powerful. Now, how did they become so powerful? Or more importantly, how did they obtain so much money? Because it's really the possession of all that wealth that makes them so powerful. Well, first and foremost, through the donations that people were giving. Remember, they were told they had to provide the church with so much money. Another thing, we talked about this last week, was indulgences. So for every sin, every crime committed, we had this list. For each sin, there would be an amount. Pay that amount, you're guaranteed forgiveness, guaranteed entrance into heaven. So what ends up happening brings us to the Reformation. We talked about this. The Renaissance gave us one of the most amazing inventions, the printing press. People now learn to read. They're reading the Bible for themselves. And as a result, they're figuring out there's nothing about indulgences in here. So this obviously upsets people, and as a result, we get Martin Luther, we get the 95 Theses, and people become what is called Protestant. Now, Protestants and Catholic are very different, but we'll get to that later. First thing to keep in mind is that Northern Europe breaks away from the church, they become Protestant. Southern Europe, which is where the Pope resides, remains Catholic. Keeping the peace between these two religions becomes very difficult. Remember, in Spain, we had the Spanish Inquisition. This is their attempt to rid the country of anyone that's not Catholic. If the Catholic Church in Spain to really reassert its power, they go out, they determine who isn't Catholic. If you're not, you either have to convert, leave, or you will be killed. So this obviously impacts society very negatively. There's a lot of tension going on. And what does it mean to be Protestant? Well, to be Protestant, you don't necessarily need to go to church. Martin Luther comes out with this thing that's called the priesthood of all believers. And what this means is that anyone can have a direct relationship with God. You don't need to go to church. You don't need to connect with Christ through a priest or through the Pope. You don't need to take communion. You don't need to go to confession. All you need to do is read the Bible, live a good life. This challenges the church because the church has been telling people for years that you need to come to church, you need to listen to the preachings of the priest, you need to pay so much money. Without needing to do any of these things, people are no longer going to come to church, and eventually the church is going to lose its power. So this obviously upsets the church significantly. And ultimately, what we get as a result of so many people being Protestant and so many people being Catholic are a series of religious wars. Now, in France, we have the Huguenots versus Catholics. Huguenots are just a different form of Protestant. And what is important to keep in mind is that after this conflict, this war that occurs in France, we get the Edict of Nantes. This grants religious freedom in most of France. Now, the more important war that we want to focus on is the 30 Years' War. This is sparked, well, there's a lot of tension going on, so it's obviously been, built up for a while, but this is specifically sparked by the King of Bohemia making everyone Catholic in his country. He closes Protestant churches, and Protestants are very upset. So as a result, Protestants then begin overthrowing their Catholic rulers. Specifically, one Catholic, I believe it was a priest, ends up getting thrown out a window. So they, declare that he's murdered. Revolt spreads to other European countries. There's just a long series of wars. After 30 years, however, of all these religious wars, all these tensions, they end up coming up with the Treaty of Westphalia, which allows rulers to determine whether their country will be Protestant or Catholic. Now, why is this so significant? Well, today, living in America, we have what's called religious freedom. We have separation of church and state. So we don't, because we live here, have to be Catholic or Christian or Muslim or Hindu or what have you. We can be whatever religion we want or not be. Now, had this never occurred, we may have never had that opportunity. So it's obviously incredibly significant. Now, I know I spoke a little bit fast, so if you need to go back and review, make sure that you answer all of your questions. If the answer is not on the screen, it's because I said it. So again, go back, review, make sure you got pages 110 and 111 complete.